Okay, I'm pinching myself and I can confirm this is not a dream. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to the Aspen Chamber Resort Association's 2020 Tourism Outlook Forum. I'm Debbie Braun, president of the Aspen Chamber, and I appreciate all of you joining us for this virtual format today. So much has changed since we met a year ago at the Aspen Institute. We never could have anticipated that our next forum would see coronavirus as the second most searched word on the internet. Terms like pandemic, Zoom, unprecedented, virtual would all become part of our daily lexicon, and uncertainty would be a feeling that we're all much more familiar with. How about we play a quick little game? To the first two people who can add the 5 commitments of containment in the chat, you're going to win a $25 gift card. 5 commitments of containment. Get them in the chat. Let's see who's going to win. Our country, our state, and our community were delivered a curveball this year, to say the least. We're in the middle of what's being called the Great Interruption. The multiple headwinds of global pandemic, civic unrest, high unemployment, recession, political turbulence are changing our lives in ways that may linger for generations. I'm proud to say that ACRA played a valuable role in the collective response to the pandemic. From the onset, we coalesced as a team with the City of Aspen, Pitkin County, Public Health, and many others to help our neighbors, workers, and guests understand and navigate challenges brought on by this completely unfamiliar adversary. We quickly served as a primary business resource for the latest information on the virus, local restrictions, and visitor info. At the same time, wonderful organizations like the Aspen Community Foundation, Aspen Strong, Food Bank of the Rockies, and the Aspen Skiing Company were organizing food drives and mental health check-ins for our residents and our employees. The arts and cultural community produced virtual seasons and drive-in movies that were helping to lift our spirits. And the restaurants were actually heroic with their pivot to takeout menus and outdoor dining. Our local banks also rose to the occasion, processing millions of dollars through the Payroll Protection Plan. The City of Aspen's support was swift and impactful, offering grants and loans to businesses. I just want to personally say thank you to Aspen City Council and the staff. And we certainly owe a debt of gratitude to Aspen Valley Hospital and their team, along with the Pitkin County Commissioners. Koenemann, Public Health Director, and her staff, who are working to keep our community safe, they need a big whoop whoop too. They did a great job. ACRA was instrumental in connecting public health officials with our members with the goal of getting business open safely. To us, this is the essence of defying ordinary. It's about leveraging the power in our connections and our alliances. It's about seeking out and relying on the insights and skills of those around us to overcome obstacles and achieve goals. It's about embracing adversity and demonstrating courage to guide and lead. Much of our early effort was supported by the ACRA Board of Directors, who immediately jumped into action, and I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. As we shift our near-term attention from a crisis mindset to recovery and resurgence, our focus is on defining the new realities of doing business in Aspen, carving the path to a new normal. Today, we hope to provide you with useful information to help you navigate the winter season and beyond. ACRA's Director of Marketing, Eliza Voss, will review our community marketing initiatives. Andrew Ernemann will tell us how real estate activity, both from a rental and a purchase standpoint, interacted with traditional tourism this summer. Mike Kaplan from the Aspen Skiing Company will give his expectations of the winter season. We're really happy to have Bill Tomcich update us on the Aspen Airport winter flight operations, and Dan Blakenship discussing RFTA's winter plans for moving visitors and residents. And we're going to finish the program with Ralph Garrison of the Insight Collective, highlighting best practices in this new reality. I'm extremely proud of our team and what we've accomplished. Feel free to thank them in the chat. Tell them all what a great job they've done. Each of them rose to the occasion and continue to perform at a high level under a lot of grace and so much pressure. So for my staff, thank you so much. And to all of you for your time this morning. I'll see you over at the Institute for questions and answers. Eliza's out on the back deck right now, so I'm going to send it over to her. Eliza, you can take it from here.
Thank you, Debbie, and thank you all for being here today. I'd like to take a little walk down memory lane to the work we did as an organization that set us up for success during a year that threw us all the curveballs possible. I'd like to remind ourselves of the good old days of January and February and the work we were doing at the end of 2019 and early 2020 is what I like to call foresight for 2020. It's something that we didn't know, but it really set us up to be able to pivot and thrive during a stressful time. One of those things was our strategic plan and the setup of our core values. In 2020, it was the first year of a 5-year strategic plan that will carry us through 2025. As part of that plan, we established some core values, and I'll review 3 of my favorites now. We cultivate transparent, open, and honest communications. Communicate was one of the things we really highlighted this year. Whether it was through Zoom or good old-fashioned phone call, we were communicating. Another one of my favorites from 2020 is we honor the interconnectivity of the entire community. That has never been more true as we really thread the needle between keeping the community safe while also reopening the economy to our tourists and locals alike. And finally, my all-time favorite for 2020 is we adapt to dynamic changes in our ecosystem. Boy, do we ever. Another element of the work that we were doing that set us up for success was our transition from a destination marketing organization to destination management. We were well on our way in this transition with the focus of collaboration, dispersion, and education really highlighting our work. Sustainability is one of the forefront items of our organization as we make all of our destination marketing decisions through that lens. That was really helpful in setting us up for success through this transition year. We had received the DMAP certification, the Destination Marketing Accreditation certification through Destinations International in 2019. Some of those best practices we were putting into play at the beginning of 2020. One of those was our technology plan, and I'd like to give a shout out to John Davies, who set all of us up in collaboration with Mitchell & Company to be able to remote work in January. That was done entirely without the foresight of knowing that we were going to be completely remote by middle of March. Also, on February 12th, we hosted an all-staff crisis communications training. Little did we know that within a month's time, that crisis communications plan would be in full swing, with all of us working remotely from home. I'd like to give a huge shout out to our staff who pivoted and rose to the occasion to create basically a brand new microsite featuring all COVID information, as well as took on additional social channels and really communicated across the board with members, stakeholders, and our visitors. This was all while the rest of the world was busy making sourdough bread and building puzzles at home. So thank you to the ACRA staff for the hard work and the success during this stressful time. When the mountains closed on March 15th, it was pretty evident early on that tourism was going to be one of the hardest industries hit. So we were hard at work figuring out how we could move through this crisis. I called the work we did following March 15th Pivot Plus, because we took things that we were already doing and pivoted them to accommodate the current climate. The Marketing Advisory Committee became our Tourism Recovery Task Force. We were meeting quickly on Zoom to figure out how we could best pull through this challenging time and open up for summer tourism. We focused that work into 4 different lenses: community vibrancy, education and communication, and visitor experience, as well as destination promotion. We were successful in securing a $200,000 loan from the City of Aspen General Fund, as well as accessing $300,000 worth of reserves that we had built up and the city held in advance of contract stipulations. Let's look at what community vibrancy looks like. In the beginning, we were sure that we wanted to invite our own community back out and experience everything Aspen has to offer before we opened back up to visitors. Initially, we thought this might look like a summer school activation. However, as time marched on and public health orders stayed in place, we realized that group gatherings were just not something we were going to be able to pull off. However, we were pleased to be able to collaborate with many community organizations to pull off Movies at the Meadows, a free drive-in movie event for locals that took place in early June. This was a wonderful collaboration with Aspen Film, the Aspen Institute, Aspen Meadows, Aspen Music Festival and School, and Roland and Broughton Architecture. We are so pleased that we were able to pull this off. It was also clear that another industry that would be hit hard were our arts and cultural organizations, because they so much revolve around in-person entertainment and gathering. So in order to support those organizations, we facilitated a cooperative advertising opportunity in Aspen Magazine and its Houston sister publication, as well as Mountain Living, and utilized WeCycle panels for 5 weeks throughout the summer to promote those virtual events for all of our visitors and locals to enjoy. I'd like to give a shout out also to Jazz Aspen Snowmass and Theater Aspen, who were able to pull off in-person programming to their audiences in a safe and effective way. That really defies ordinary. Also, as a side note, the Aspen Historical Society's museum exhibit right now is a wonderful place to social distance and enjoy Aspen as a retrospective. We also were able to provide photo assets to all partners this summer. It was important to us, when we knew all of our stakeholders' budgets were cut because of COVID, that we could partner with local photographers, purchase assets, and provide them out so that all of our stakeholders could use them in their own marketing and efforts, knowing that a rising tide lifts all ships. We also pivoted as the Pivot Plus on our 7908 Reasons to Spend Local campaign. This is a campaign we've been running for about 2 years to promote shopping locally in Aspen. We ran this campaign on our 2 local papers as well as digital efforts, and the loan from the city really allowed us to amplify this spend and get the word out on the importance shopping local is and how it benefits our community. This effort is really aimed at changing the way our locals think about shopping locally versus the visitor, as we know the visitor is already spending in our retail stores. The next lens we looked at for tourism recovery was education and communication. One of our major pieces was the Visitor Resource Guide. Again, this was designed for our stakeholders to get out in their pre-arrival communications, as well as a digital resource on our website. In this guide, we had public health information, hotlines, mandatory mask zone restrictions, as well as how-to content. This included how-to dining out, shopping, outdoor recreation, general awareness, and hotel and condo check-in. This was also accompanied by the how-to video series. This was one of our biggest pieces, trying to communicate to the guest how they needed to behave when they were in town. All paid media landing pages had this resource guide linked on them, so no one who landed on our website off of our paid campaign could claim that they did not know expectations and guidelines for visiting Pitkin County. We also were able to pivot the chatbot on our website, so anyone coming to the website, the first question they were asked is, are you looking for COVID-specific travel information? And our little chatbot, Diana, both in real life and in digital world, directed people to the Visitor Resource Guide. I'd also like to give a huge shout out to all of our member businesses who participated in the task forces. These members of our community really rose to the occasion and got us back open safely. So shout out to those members of the Hotel and Lodging Task Force Recovery, our own Marketing Advisory Committee who served as the Tourism Recovery Task Force, Restaurants Task Force, as well as the Outdoor Guides. Thank you so much for all you do to make this community defy ordinary. We're also pleased that we continue to collaborate on public health information, liaising with Aspen Skiing Company, Snowmass Tourism, the City of Aspen, and Pitkin County to ensure that all people within the community, visitors or not, are receiving the same message on the 5 commitments of containment and how to enjoy Aspen responsibly and sustainably. We will continue this work throughout the winter months as well. We strengthened our relationship with the City of Aspen with the Ambassador Program, which was crucial in getting the word out on the mask zone in downtown Aspen. Our ambassadors were on the mall from early July through Labor Day weekend, passing out masks, hand sanitizer, maps, and more to ensure the guest experience was one that they could enjoy in a safe way. We also continued with the city on our partnership with the City of Aspen Town Halls, really facilitating that conversation between community and business and making sure we are set up for success in the coming winter months ahead. And finally, the Insights Collective is a group made up of some of our long-term data friends in RRC Associates, Ralph Garrison, who we'll hear from later today, and we're sponsoring content on best practices in the new normal with the Aspen Times. You will find those articles on Wednesdays, and we hope you enjoy that service from our destination management organization, really providing educational and communication tools out to the community so you have the best tools to thrive during this time. We also wanted to ensure the visitor experience was memorable and on par with the Aspen values. One of the things we did to ensure that was the Defy Ordinary gift card. This was important for our hotels and lodges to be able to maintain rate integrity during a stressful time. Following the 2008 financial crisis, it took the lodges 5 years to recover rate. We were pleased to offer this program, and through the end of September had reimbursed nearly 2,400 cards, just shy of $60,000. Right now, the last week of October, we are accepting the cards down at the 590 North Mill Street office. So if you have some to redeem, please go do so and see Diana. We look forward to continuing this program through its expiration date of December 31st, 2020. Also, while it seems like a long time ago now, as we were getting ready to reopen, we provided hotels and lodges with Corbeau, a locally based company, face coverings. And those face coverings could either be used for staff or to provide extra value to the guests as well. We also were pleased to deliver over 75 gallons of Woody Creek hand sanitizer to our restaurants and retailers as they were reopening at the end of May and beginning of June. Finally, the business of promoting the destination. At the beginning of quarantine, we immediately paused all paid media. So the only channels we were using, which was our website, which was relaunched in the middle of February and provided us with mobile-first technology, which was crucial during this time since many visitors were driving around the state and had not yet made their decision about where they would visit. That mobile-first technology plays a huge role in travel planning in 2020. We also were able to rely heavily on our e-newsletters as well as our social media channels. And the main goal was keeping the dream of travel to Aspen alive. Keeping the dream of travel alive included such things as Restaurant Week bingo, coloring pages for Aspen, as well as promoting a video that you must have seen in the waiting room here, The Great Interruption with Aspen Historical Society. We immediately pivoted our weekly blog, This Week in Aspen, to This Week in Aspen virtually, and saw some of our highest click-throughs on our newsletters ever in March and April, proving that content was relevant for everybody who was stuck at home. We also ran an in-state promotion with Evective TV, promoting the drive visitor to come visit Aspen when they were ready, as well as a digital media campaign with Always Mountain Time News to promote to those drive markets who might have been out of state. As we know, this summer, people were willing to drive further and longer to be able to recreate safely. Our sales team's effort mirrored those on the leisure side. They did a lot of reach out to drive market to nurture the relationships for long-term recovery. We are also pleased to announce that earlier this month, they were actually able to host an in-person 25-person event with Destination Colorado, a successful socially distanced event. We were pleased to bring that to the community. From a public relations standpoint, we went from thinking we wouldn't be able to host any media to successfully hosting over 20 individuals this summer. Stories were focused on how seriously Aspen was taking the pandemic and how it was still possible to enjoy a vacation in the midst of a chaotic time in our lives. The Tourism Task Force recovery was a swift response to the initial onset of the crisis. Simultaneously, we began to see some trends in travel emerge as destinations began reopening. This only added to our pivot plus mentality as we continued to have to accommodate for those trends as they were emerging in the midst of this pandemic. Some of those trends locally and nationally were wildfires, the justice movement, economic impacts from the health crisis. Some of the travel trends that we saw were last-minute bookings, the increased demand on outdoor experiences, as well as limited group travel for weddings or meetings. We launched our comeback campaign on June 1st and immediately paused for 1 week to honor the justice movement. Diversity has always been a part of ACRA's initiatives, and we were pleased to include it as part of our strategic plan even prior to the most recent push for diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, the current climate really brought that to the forefront, and we were able to pause and pivot and invite some diverse social media influencers into the community, as well as we look forward to ensuring our next photo shoot is as diverse as possible. This stop, go, pivot seemed to be a theme throughout the summer, from the justice movement to the initial onset of COVID, as well as the wildfires. Our social media was able to remain nimble and adjust to current climate, and we saw that strength reflected in gains in our social media, really in a climate that shouldn't have indicated we had such positive results. The website saw similar engagement and success based on work we did behind the scenes, as well as the comeback campaign, and really targeting the right guest with the right information. We are pleased to show those data to you now. Another pivot plus from this summer was the Maroon Bells reservation system. The Maroon Bells reservation system had been part of our plan for sustainable tourism for a while, and we had begun discussions prior to COVID. However, when COVID hit, it became apparent that a reservation system was the only way we would be able to open this public lands safely and effectively for this summer. We are pleased that we had over 1,000% increase on Maroon Bells contact on our website due to hosting the reservation system. Partnership between Pitkin County, the City of Aspen, RFTA, H2O Ventures, and the Aspen Chamber proved to be a fruitful success for our first round, and we look forward to maintaining some sort of reservation system going forward into summer 2021. Sustainable travel has long been an initiative of Aspen Chamber with the Aspen Pledge, the original How to Aspen campaign, and our partnership with Pledge for the Wild, which empowers our visitor to give back financially to those wild places they love. We took it to a new level with action this summer with partnering with Roaring Fork Outdoor Volunteers and Valley-wide Chambers on the Valley-wide Cleanup Day, September 30th. Not only did I find this personally fulfilling, I totally had a sustainable travel nerd out moment when 2 of the volunteers at my session were guests staying at the Gant. This is a huge moment for sustainable travel, and I'm thrilled to see our visitor is just as interested in giving back to our destination as the people are that live here. We look forward to partnering with Roaring Fork Outdoor Volunteers on some more initiatives for ecotourism. I want to thank the public land managers who were able to bring the Valley-wide cleanup and our sustainable stewardship initiatives to light. We couldn't have done it without your help. As I mentioned, another travel trend we saw emerge was the limit on group size and events. So that did not escape Aspen. But we did see some success in hosting some smaller socially distanced weddings. Our sales team was able to work with a planner from Miami and California who she had met as far back as 2016 in converting their over 200 plus person weddings in those destinations respectively into a 50-person wedding in Aspen under the guidelines, which were able to bring business to our vendors and event venues in a safe and responsible way. Here are a couple of testimonials from those planners. Here's a slide of our occupancy and sales tax. We can see, of course, that we are pacing down, however, not as bad as feared as in March. Our lodging tax is coming in 22% year-to-date below budget. We had projected about 50%, so there's some good news there. Average occupancy is down 40% year-to-date, January through September, and the summer season was down year-to-date 40% as well. We saw some great gains in September, where we saw occupancy for the first time since the pandemic hit outpaced September 2019 by 3%. We know that winter is pacing about 30% off of last year. However, with the trend in last-minute booking, as well as $1 billion in airline credit out there in the world, there's reason to be cautiously optimistic. We do see some gains Thanksgiving week, and we hope that we are able to accommodate those guests outdoors in a safe way, following all guidelines as dictated by public health. Here's a look at the wastewater flow data. There are many factors that contribute to wastewater flow data, such as low flow fixtures or construction, but it does give us a picture that we might not have outpaced 2019 until September. Partially, that could be attributed to when Labor Day weekend falls between August and September. There was definitely a feeling of busyness in town this summer, whether our occupancy reports or wastewater data indicate that, and there are many contributing factors. Life was just taking place outdoors, so there were people on the sidewalks and in our parking spaces enjoying outdoor dining, which we were so thrilled they were able to do. There were also restrictions on number of people allowed in stores, so there was always lines outside of some of our favorite retailers. There also was a cancellation of events, which is a natural dispersion technique for our guests. So there was very limited space for people to be congregating. We also know that there was limited capacity on RFTA buses, and we'll hear from Dan Blakenship shortly on how that impacted summer and winter operations. Andrew Ernemann will speak to trends in real estate, which we know interacted with our regular summer guests. Luckily, our real estate clients were able to boost retail and restaurant sales in a way that was unanticipated for this summer. I'd also like to show some data from Arrivalist, one of our research platforms that shows data of visitors into the destination who stay 14 days or less. It is not able to differentiate between second homeowners and visitors, but it does not account for visitors that they see come into the destination frequently, such as a commuter. On this chart, we see that July arrivals outpaced 2019 significantly. Clearly, we did not see that data reflected in our occupancy reports. So the Arrivalist data and the occupancy data are not matching up. And this really highlights the need for auditing of the gray market, which City Council was able to accomplish some gains there on October 13th of this month. Not only is it important to be able to capture the lodging tax in the gray market, we also believe it's an incredibly important step in sustainable travel to be able to communicate to these guests things like the Aspen Pledge and the How-To campaign. Getting guests, kind of inviting them into the fold of the community, is an incredible way to make sure that they are experiencing the destination responsibly. Another interesting fact by Arrivalist is these feeder markets, which actually mirror those of a normal summer pretty remarkably. And now that I've gotten us into the weeds with some data, I'd like to take us back up and talk about awards. Who doesn't love awards? I know Debbie Braun loves an award, and here we are today, able to celebrate her award that she received in September at the Colorado Tourism Office Governor's Conference for her outstanding individual contribution to Colorado tourism. We are also thrilled that we were able to receive the Outstanding Community Tourism Initiative for the Roaring Fork Valley Gold Center status for IMBA, the International Mountain Bike Association. This was courtesy of Snowmass Tourism's award submission, and we're thrilled to share it with our partners in Carbondale, Basalt, and Glenwood. Thank you so much. We look forward to continuing many of these initiatives through winter with an evolution of our How-To campaign, making the visitor resource guide winter friendly, as well as providing winter images for our stakeholders so they may amplify their messaging as well. At the very core of our organization is communications. So we will continue to remain connected with our community and our member businesses, as well as our visitor base, to ensure we have a successful, healthy, and safe winter season. Aspen does winter well, and we look forward with cautious optimism to the months ahead, and we look forward to seeing you on the slopes. I can't wait until we can gather together again. Have a great morning. So here I am live today, and we're going to take all questions at the end in the small breakout group. So please stick around and you'll be able to access each individual presenter in their question and answer section. And now here's Andrew Ernemann.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Eliza and Debbie, for hosting me and having me as part of this presentation. It's just incredible to see what you and ACRA have accomplished this year. I'm just blown away. As usual, I've got about an hour's worth of presentation material to fit into 10 minutes or less. So I'm going to dive right in and share my screen. It's just incredible what's happened with Aspen real estate this year. Thinking back to this past winter, going into March, what felt like kind of a normal, good Aspen real estate winter, and nothing too surprising one way or the other. And then we went into complete shutdown mode and had 2 months plus of literally nothing, no showings, no open houses, no contracts. The contracts that were in place, many of those fell out at that time. So it was really just hard to see where we were going. And then sure enough, around mid-May, the phone started ringing, the emails started trickling in about possible summer rentals. And that was surprising still at the time because we just didn't know where we were going. And that just transformed into an over-the-top summer rental market. And then by June, contracts being written on purchases and just exploded from there. And I'll go through a few slides to try and give some context to that and show you exactly what I'm talking about. Looking back all the way to 2005 and just trying to show consistently January through September, since that's what we have data for so far in 2020, the total number of residential sales in Aspen. If you look back at 05, 06, 07, the numbers were higher than what we even saw the last couple spikes in 2015 and 2017. And that was a different market. So keep in mind, back in 05, 06, 07, leading into the Great Recession, that was a market where there was a lot of real estate churn and trading. People were flipping out of properties very quickly. Prices were going up 20% a year. And then as we climbed out of the Great Recession, and like I said, in 15 and in 18 had some nice, healthy years there. This year, not anything remarkable if you just look at it in aggregate through September. How many sales have we had? And this is really just tracking residential in Aspen. Doesn't include affordable housing, does not include fractional sales, does not include commercial sales, but consistently year over year, you can see, all right, 2020 was nothing remarkable compared to what we've been having, and certainly nothing compared to those spike years. But there's more to the story. And digging in just a little bit more, what really struck this year was you could see that we had a record month in August, and then September just blew that out when it comes to the number of sales. If you go all the way back to 2005, there was 1 month with 64 sales. It was a big month, but really it was this year that we finally broke that record and then completely exceeded it. September. October's on pace to be a huge month. And what's hard to see in this chart is if you look back again, 05, 06, 07, just the general level activity outside of that one spike of 64 sales was much higher than what we've had the last several years in terms of just general sales activity. Even though we've been in a strong market, an upward trending market, it's not the level of sales churn really that we had back then. And very hard to see on this chart, but May of this year, we literally had 2 closings in the entire month in Aspen. I mean, that was just a complete shutdown of the market. And I learned yesterday that we had a record month in September, not just here from the number of sales, but record month ever for any county in the state of Colorado. Land Title publishes information every month, and it looks like Pickens County for total dollar volume of closing set a record ever in the state of Colorado. So it just gives you a sense of where we came from in the last several months, from literally nothing, 2 closings in May, to shattering the records. Looking at pricing, this is just an easy chart to look at from a price per square foot. Aspen residential sales, again, trying to keep seasonality out of the picture here, just January through September for every year going back to 2005. And you can see the run up going up through 2008. Then we hit the Great Recession, prices dropped down. And then as we started climbing back up again, this year already a 13% increase in prices. And honestly, I expect that to be closer to and maybe exceeding 20% by the time we get to the end of the year. There's a tremendous amount of contracts in the pipeline right now. And as those work their way through the closings, like they have been the last 2 months and through this month, I think we're seeing prices go up even more than that 13%. This is where it just becomes so visually obvious what an outlier year this has become. And keep in mind, we had those 2 months with no contracts being written and several contracts falling out from the winter. But to see our dollar volume over the years hovering in anywhere from the 500-ish million range up to around 800 million. We had a high of 964 million back in 2017, again, January through September, Aspen residential sales, and to be at 1.6 billion already this year, that just almost double some of our best years that we've had ever, just shows you how striking the rebound has been. In the face of all this increase in terms of prices and dollar volume, it's important to understand where are we from a supply perspective, because this is what really drives prices: increased demand, lower supply. And over the past 10 years, yes, there's some noise in this chart. This shows the total number of listings for Aspen residential real estate by month. And you can see the spikes up and then the drops. But really, the long-term trend, aside from the seasonality of the ups and downs, is that we're about 50% of the listing inventory we had 10 years ago. Shifting over to the rental market, it's a little harder to track, and I really appreciate everything that Eliza presented about the rental market and the gray market, so to speak, in terms of where are people staying when they come to town. Obviously, it felt like a very busy summer this year, and you can see that the rental bookings, this was just our company, Aspen Snowmass Sotheby's, the rental bookings spiked tremendously. Like I said, starting in May, when the phone started ringing, emails started coming in. June peaked, and then it's dropped off and more normalized since then. I think it's picking back up again as we head towards the winter months. But this just gives you a sense of how strong the surge was early summer and through the summer in terms of people wanting to be here, wanting to find a place to stay. Average rental duration, about 90 days, so longer than you might think if you're thinking about vacation rentals. And what's interesting is a lot of people booking rentals for the entire summer when normally they might book for 2 weeks or a month. A lot of people booking rentals to stay an entire year that normally they might only come for a week or two. So a definite shift in terms of the pattern and how long people are planning to spend time here. So what does all this mean? Certainly the possibility of more full-time residents in Aspen, whether that's through the rental market or purchases. I can just tell you anecdotally on my end, a lot of the transactions this year, the sales transactions, were for people looking to really spend time here, not looking to take advantage of the investment market as much as we saw pre-Great Recession, where people were literally flipping in and out of properties. This is much more people looking for a home, whether that's a part-time home where they will spend a meaningful period of time here during every year, or for some people really making a shift to full-time now. The active rental market shows that at least there's been a short-term transition towards rental of private homes, condos. I think you could see that in the lodging numbers, where lodging occupancy being down a bit this year, of course, to be expected. But from a rental standpoint, hard to find properties that are vacant, and that's been a trend all throughout the year. So I think many of the people who have been staying in our local lodges shifted this year towards having a little more space or privacy in townhomes and homes. Definitely an opportunity, like Eliza touched on, for short-term rental tax collection. A lot of these rentals go through third-party websites, and so I'm glad to see the city is moving forward on figuring out how to track that. Certainly collecting the tax is a big opportunity, but quite honestly, I think the most important piece here is just understanding, what do we have? Where are people staying? Where's the demand? What kind of properties? And how are we able to support that in a meaningful and positive way going forward? And then lastly, I'll say, I think it's unlikely the spike that we've seen in the sales and rental activity will sustain. And I'm going to shift over to kind of a fun slide to show you why. I put this slide together originally back in, I think, around 2010 or 11, when we were in the depths of the Great Recession. And this is just a fun psychological way to look at the market. And if you go all the way back to after 9/11, when the market here, real estate market, was more of a value market, and then started climbing to what I'd say a balanced market, where prices were increasing in 05 and into 06 and 07, and then shifted to more of an emotional market. And then, like I said, in 08, no idea what's about to happen. Literally, we had a bubble. I mean, we just had prices going up at an unsustainable rate every year, 20% plus for 2 or 3 years in a row. And when you have that kind of market, it's almost certain from a real estate standpoint, you've got to have a correction. And that's exactly what we had. And you drop all the way down to 2012, when we finally started to climb back out and had what I'd say were the early adopters starting to say, all right, I'm confident that Aspen's coming back. I'm confident in Aspen as a long-term place I want to spend time or invest money in real estate. And it's been many, many years now coming up out of that to what's been a very balanced market the last several years with sustainable 3 to 5% a year price increases. This is the first year, ironically, where I'd say we're in a much more emotional market. Many more people buying properties just purely out of trying to get away from where they are, trying to get here, trying to get more space, finding that this is a place they need to be or want to be emotionally. And where does that take us? It's hard to know, but what I can say is it won't be sustainable to keep the 20%-ish price increase I expect us to see in the market this year. It could go another year or two. There could be more of a pause in the market. It's anybody's guess at this point. And obviously nobody wants to make predictions based on how this year went. But I do want to point out it's unsustainable that the strength that we've seen in the market so far this year. That's it for me. Appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing what the rest of the presenters have. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And now we will hear from Mike Kaplan on winter operations.
All right. Good to see everyone virtually. Looks like you can all see my whole screen. But good, you get to see my notes too, right? There's a ton of energy out there right now around the ski season. Obviously, the snow on Sunday didn't hurt that. Pretty awesome to be looking out the window right now and seeing snow on the peaks and snow on the bowl. It's a La Nina year. And I think as we all remember, 07, 08 was a La Nina year. So I'm not calling that, I'm not forecasting that, but I'm hopeful we're going to have a year like that, which was really amazing. As we go into the year, the goals are pretty simple, right? It's get open and stay open. We don't want to repeat last year, lest we forget March 15th, we shut down and we were shut down for the rest of the year. So we've got to emphasize safety. We got to emphasize the fact that we really are all in this together. And finally, we want to make sure we come out of this pandemic in a way where we look back and we can all be proud. We can say we did it in a way that didn't compromise our values. In fact, we built upon our values and our brand. You know, this year walking around town, I've gotten probably more really genuine, sincere, statements of I'm more excited for ski season than ever. I need this winter more than ever, and I think that's I think most of us are feeling that way. And this time of COVID, this time of uncertainty, of trauma, of sort of ongoing loss that we're all experiencing at some level, including some of us at the ultimate level. It really puts things in perspective. I think it makes, ironically, skiing more important than ever. But if we're being honest and realistic about the winter, like everything in our lives right now, we know it is going to be different. Some things will be good different. Some things will be, forgettably different. And yeah, let's, not dance around it. COVID definitely sucks. But it's also making us better in a lot of ways. And I do mean that. I really think it is. And so a few examples. We used to, or I actually early on been referring to our approach for this year. What's it going to be like? What's it going to feel like? I use the word old school. I think it's going to be old school in a good way. I don't think those headbands are coming back. Those 207 centimeters straight skis. But I think there's a lot of good things. If you're like me, I think been battling to put the cell phone down, to stop counting, to stop, tagging and focusing on quantity over quality. And I think that these times, this slowdown is called for and driven more what I'd call full engagement in our lives. And I think that's the opportunity on the Hill. That said, we're not going back to the dark ages of flip phones. We are using technology. We're really accelerating our embrace of technology in this COVID era and finding ways to do business and use technology to, more fully immerse us, to eliminate and reduce that friction that many of us have experienced in our lives. And honestly, we in the ski industry have not moved quickly enough away from and embrace technology to remove that friction, to make sure people can maximize time on the Hill. As I like to say, more glide. That's really what skiing's all about anyway, right? So technology for glide is our goal here. We are launching advanced ticket sales today, I believe. Last I heard, that was the plan. Thanks, as everyone said, to the ACRA team, but I really want to thank our teams who have been working so hard to rewrite every single rule, reimagine every product, and then make it available and relaunch it and communicate it to the guests. There's a ton of work going on in this community behind the scenes to get things going, to get up and running. So you can see pictured here our app. And if you're going to take anything away from my presentation, download the app and book things in advance and stay up to speed virtually, primarily on our app. Is going to give you a bunch of ways to do that. And really encourage you guys and all your guests and all your customers to do that. You can see it's a little small, but the right side of this app photo has a bunch of menu items. Express lift access. So if you already have a lift ticket, or if you've got one of the passes that offers validation, you can tap that button and add days remotely. If you've got a media card, if you've got a lift ticket, you already have the media card, you can add days to that, an Aspen card, as we call it. If you don't have an Aspen card new this year, you're going to be able to buy that online and then go right to one of, I believe, we have 20 ticket kiosks, and we'll send you a QR code. You show up that QR code, you put it under the kiosk, and a new ticket prints out. So our ticket offices will be open, but we're trying to enable touchless transactions wherever we can and minimize people's needs to go into the ticket office. So that kind of philosophy is applying to everything. It's rentals, it's ski school, it's dining. I don't know if any of you were up riding the bike park in Snowmass this summer. You could be on the gondola, go to the app, order your lunch. By the time you got to the gondola, it was ready to go. You could grab it, go up the L camp chair, eat it on the way up, and not miss a run or miss a turn. So we're going to build on that. Pre-order, pre-book, everything you can. And again, encourage your guests, because as we're looking at capacity and making sure we don't experience any pinch points, don't experience any areas where social distancing is compromised, we're asking people to book in advance. And because we will sell out of things, we will sell out of tickets. We'll definitely sell out of seats available on the mountain. So really encourage advanced booking, advanced reservations. Speaking of the on-mountain capacity, the restaurants is probably our biggest concern. If you think about a cold day like today or December, January, where people want to be inside, and due to social distancing requirements, we're losing more than 50% of our seating capacity. And so we've acquired 5 tents. Maybe you've seen some of this construction going on top of the mountain, top of Aspen Mountain. We've got one going in. That will make up hopefully a third of that lost capacity, depending how things, what level of the corona meter's at. But that's going to help a little, but obviously not overcome that amount of seating capacity reduction. So doing what we can, but it's going to take all of us getting more creative in, how we ski, when we dine, where we dine, and how we plan for that. So encourage, again, advanced planning when it comes to eating on the mountain. We've also, of course, adding, heaters on decks, and we've added a ton of picnic tables and creating a lot of opportunity for Old school dining on the mountain, al fresco, as I said, ton of grab and go ways to do it. And, I think it's also not to be overlooked. I encourage all of us to dress a little differently, be prepared to eat outdoors. It's one thing to be skiing, and then go in. We're going to be staying outside a lot longer. Uphilling does continue, as I'm sure you guys have all seen, but trying to make sure, again, we can manage it in a way that enables social distancing. So we have blackouts over the holidays, asking people not to uphill during operating hours over Christmas, President's Weekend, and asking you to pay attention to our messaging, again, our website and our app, because we may have to shut it down if we get surprised on individual days and we get busier than ever. And what else? Big change, is après ski is definitely going to be way toned down. That's one of the things we're really learning from COVID, is that these super spreader events are a big deal. That's really where I've heard the number, 20% of the people are spreading 80% of the disease, and it's coming from these super spreader events. So while we're renowned for après ski, we've got to pull it back, tone it down, and get down to skiing this year, and not partaking in the après ski activities that we all will look forward to when we can have those back. Still be doing things like ski school, locals clinics, but our main change there is a maximum of max 5 people in groups. So that might, again, be a change that's positive and lasting, more personalized attention, and avoiding those large class sizes. And then finally, drop-in daycare for out-of-state visitors is pretty difficult in COVID. Not something we're going to be offering for this year. So please share that with your guests as well. We don't want anyone surprised by that. We will be sharing a list of daycare providers or people who can go provide daycare, babysitting, and those kinds of services in home, in one of Andrew's home that he's rented, or wherever the guests may be staying. We get asked a lot about how we're managing capacity. As you've all heard, we're starting the season without a reservation system. We are building one, but we're really hopeful we don't have to use it. So the idea is to really spread people out. AVSC is maybe one of the best examples of that. As you think about the AVSC, Locals Kids programs, think about Highlands and Snowmass have those big Saturday programs, several hundred kids on the hill, all meeting at the same time, same place, and it creates a bit of a bottleneck. So working with the ski club, they've been great. What we're going to do this year is split those Saturday programs into 2. Half the kids will be on Saturday, half the kids will be on Sunday. And then we further will spread them out again by having a 9 o'clock start time and a 10 o'clock start time. So that Saturday 9:30 bulge we used to see is going to be reduced by 75%. So we're hopeful that things like that are going to enable us to operate without a reservation system. But as we've been saying, we can't guarantee that. It's going to depend on the chronometer, working with the local health officials and our state officials to see, and if we have to pull it back further, that will be the mechanism. So I just beg and all of us, and plead with all of us not to get COVID fatigue. As we said, we want to get open, we want to stay open, and we want to do it without a reservation system. So we've all got to work together to abide by the 5 C's. Nice job, Tori, and make sure we're stopping the spread. One other point I want to make is the 7-day is amazing. It's a great product. The weekday is amazing. It's very well priced. Both of them are amazing deals. Our goal is to generate less revenue from our season passes this year. And that's why we created those 2 products. And we really, I hate to say it, but the Premier is something we all love and appreciate and embrace. And we've promoted it aggressively, obviously, over the years. It's not a great COVID product because people can just go up whenever they want, and it can create these unexpected situations where we have too many people in one place at one time. So that's why I'm encouraging you to buy the weekday, maybe add on the 7-day, or just go with the 7-day if you had a flex or double flex. I know we've heard some feedbacks like, I got to work every weekend, despite the fact that we're all being more flexible and our lives have been upended and our schedules have been upended. some people are still saying I can only ski weekends. I'd ask you to look hard at how much you skied last year and how much you plan to ski, because looking at it, that 7-day, if you compare it to last year's single flex pass, 84% of you will pay less by doing the 7-day. Those who did the double flex, it's well over 70% of you will pay less by going with the 7-day. And those who said I skied every single weekend, there were only, I think it was 2 double flex pass holders that skied every weekend, both days. There were 5 single flex pass holders who skied every single weekend. So be thoughtful, and please, I appreciate your understanding that we needed to make these changes amongst COVID. And as I said, let's not get COVID fatigue. Let's hang in there. We are definitely venturing into the unknown here. We don't know what's going to happen, obviously, and it is one of the beauties of this sport. Every season is definitely different. Every day is different. Every turn is different, and we reimagine what we do and how we interact with the mountain in this sport and in this community. And I think if we embrace it that way, I think it's going to be a really incredible season. I do think another silver lining we've realized out of this pandemic is the level of collaboration and communication that's happening with the community amongst all of us as partners, enabled in no small part by ACRA and the team and your great efforts, is really something I think we're ready, that I hope continues, because I know it's been rewarding for me, and I think we're going to all be better for it. But again, it is going to take all of us continuing to do that all winter long. We're ready to go, ready to start making snow Halloween night. I look forward to hearing that noise at 12:01 a.m. And again, the goal is to get open, stay open, and do it in a way that delivers that Aspen Snowmass experience. And my final point is I look at this and I was like, oh, look, yeah, untracked line, that's all mine. But that's not what we're about. And I think it's important in this time that we all keep that in mind, that, as Andrew talked about, we have more people here through the off season, right? And you've heard a lot of those comments, oh my God, the off season's over, it's so crowded. Or my favorite hike, oh my God, I saw 10 people on that hike. And there's a lot of that commentary out there. And look, I'm guilty of it. I think we're all guilty of it, is, what's happened here. And I think it's critical that we remember what this sport's all about, what this place is all about. It's not just consuming the magic of this place. It's about embracing it and sharing it with everyone who comes here and puts themselves out here to get up here and to really go for it. It's about opening ourselves up, truly opening ourselves up to nature, to sport, to deep personal connections with those we're enjoying it with, of course, socially distanced. It's about self-reflection that really happens in a place like this. And that's for all of us to enjoy, no matter where we come from, what the color of our skin are, what our political ideology is. And I'd submit that's exactly what we need more than ever. So I thank you for giving me some time, and I'll try to stop sharing and give it to Bill Tomcich.
Thank you, Mike. And now we'll hear from Bill Tomcich and the Fly Aspen Snowmass update.
Hello, everyone. Bill Tomcich here. I've been asked to present a little airline update on what's been happening in the industry, and certainly an awful lot has been happening since last March. It has been a wild 6 months for the airline industry. In fact, if we can go to the first slide here, beyond the cover slide, I've got a chart that illustrates what's happened throughout the United States and in terms of the rebound of air travel throughout the U.S. And this chart represents total passenger throughput measured by the TSA. And this is at all airports across the US. And the gray chart across the top represents last year's levels. And then the red bars across the bottom, or the line, actually represents what's happened this year. And obviously there was a precipitous drop off as of the middle of March, and we kind of hit rock bottom, the whole airline industry did, in April, where overall passenger throughput was down over 95% from a year ago. And it has been a slow and choppy recovery ever since. It's down 90% in May, 81% in June, 75% in July, and most recently it was down 67% in September. And month to date in October, through about the 20th, it's down about 65%. The TSA did see their biggest single day with over 1 million passengers over this past weekend, but that is still down nearly 2/3 from what it was a year ago at this point in time. So the next slide I'm going to show you kind of brings this into perspective of how the TSA overall is relative to what's happened here at Aspen, along with a number of other airports throughout the region. And since July, the average monthly passenger count at Aspen has actually paced well ahead of both the TSA average, also compared to a lot of our other peer airports that I've been benchmarking ourselves against. There are really just 3 airports that I can find that actually has seen a faster recovery than the Aspen-Pitkin County Airport, and those being Jackson Hole and Bozeman. Of course, that's fueled largely by the national parks up there. And then also Gunnison, just over the hill here. That's another client that we work with. And they've seen a significant recovery as well, albeit on a much smaller base. And that, I'll speak to this a little later. They've had some operational requirements that has forced an upgrade of their limited service from Denver. And that's one of the reasons they're seeing some capacity increases. The other interesting thing to note on this particular slide is how strong a couple of key hubs are. If you look at the number 4 and 5 down the list here, DFW and Denver are well ahead of the TSA average in terms of their capacity, the monthly passengers that they've seen. I have accurate data through the end of August for most of these airports. I've got data for a few of them through September. And to put things into perspective, the TSA, as I mentioned on the previous slide, is down about 67% for September. Aspen, highlighted about 1/3 of the way down the chart, was down 48%. So we're definitely outpacing the rest of the industry in terms of the number of passengers that are actually traveling. And you can see the other airports there on down the list are other airports that we either work with or that I have really good solid data for. If we go to the next slide, this is a new one to some people because it actually is tracking what's happened in terms of general aviation activity at the Aspen-Pitkin County Airport. I'm sure those of you have seen how many private jets have been on the ramp at Aspen, particularly in July and August. You've probably never seen that many private jets, and this graph actually proves that is the case. This is a snapshot of monthly interint GA operations at the Aspen-Pitkin County Airport for the last 5 years by month. And if you look at the sort of red, I think it shows up more or less brownish on this particular chart for July, August, and September. That's the number of GA operations relative to the last 4 years. So there truly have never been more private aircraft operations at the Aspen-Pitkin County Airport than these last several months. That is driven in part by people not wanting to get on commercial flights. It's also driven in part by the fact that we don't have as many commercial flights scheduled during the summer. And so people are finding other ways to get here. And like I said, July and August have set new all-time records for GA traffic at Aspen. And another key point on this slide is compared to the 5-year average, there have been a total of 1,332 additional GA operations, and they're defined as a takeoff or a landing, since June, above and beyond that 5-year average. So if you think we've seen a lot more private jet traffic at the Aspen-Pitkin County Airport, we have. The next slide is going to talk a little bit more about load factors and the percentage of seats filled. And this is where Aspen is kind of at the top of the list relative to a select group of peer airports that I have reliable data for. Even surpassing Bozeman and Jackson Hole. And I only have September data for a handful of markets so far, but at 73.7% load factor for Aspen, that is much better than most of the other peer airports and well ahead of the United System average, which I have data for through the end of July. If we go to the next slide, we're going to be able to talk about capacity restoration in both Aspen relative to mostly the same group of peer airports. I've also included at the bottom of the list what's happening across the entire networks for both American and United, which are the two principal carriers that we have flying in and out of Aspen on a year-round basis right now. I'll talk about Delta's suspension here in a moment. But this is the total April through November year-over-year seat capacity at select mountain airports. And as I mentioned, Jackson Hole, Gunnison, Bozeman are facing a little bit stronger in terms of capacity recovery than ASE. And as I mentioned, Gunnison is because of an upgrade of the only aircraft that is available to fly into that airport. Aspen is at the top quarter of that list, followed by Eagle. I've included Redmond, Oregon in this particular comp set. Sun Valley, Idaho, Grand Junction, and most of the others are airports here in Colorado: Denver, Durango, Montrose, and Colorado Springs. So the relative capacity recovery that we've seen at Aspen is definitely outpacing most of our peer airports. And what I also want to highlight on this particular slide is how in October and or actually in November, we have an increase in the capacity, the total seats scheduled by American and United over what all three airlines, including Delta, had last year. As I'm sure will be discussed in other presentations during this tourism outlook, the occupancy data, which I have been sharing with our commercial airlines, so this is going into their decision-making process to some degree, actually shows very strong bookings, particularly in late November and the first half of December. So that is something that we've been keeping in very close contact with our airline partners and making sure they're aware of what's happening both in terms of health orders around here and what's happening in terms of booking activity. And they have certainly seen a lot of really close-in booking activity. That's the reason American and United have continued to add capacity at the last minute. So let's start talking about winter capacity, because that's on everyone's mind. And we'll go to the next slide here, and that's going to kind of show where we stand in terms of total seats as of Wednesday afternoon, the 21st of October. And that's when this particular session is being recorded, because I want to make that caveat, because schedule changes occur every weekend, and it's entirely possible that this coming Saturday there could be some more schedule changes that may adjust these numbers. But as of this moment in time, we are within 5% of the total original scheduled capacity that was planned for the Aspen-Pickett County Airport last winter. You will notice on the far bar to the right, there are only two colors. That's because we only have American and United planned to serve the market this winter, because Delta has decided to suspend their service. They actually suspended service into Aspen as of early July. Originally, their plan was to keep Atlanta and Los Angeles in place, but suspend Salt Lake City and Minneapolis. But the decision has since been made to suspend Aspen completely, along with a couple of other airports in Colorado, including Montrose and Hayden. But I just saw their Senior Vice President of Network Planning, Joe Esposito, at a conference in Cincinnati last week. And the first thing he wanted to tell me is to assure me, and emphatically, that this is a temporary pause in their service to Aspen, that they will be back. It probably won't be with the CRJ 700. They're going to have to figure out another aircraft solution, and that's something they've been looking at along with their partner SkyWest for many years. But Joe Esposito reassured me that Delta will be back. Aspen is an important market to them, and of course, Delta Airlines is important to us, and we'd love to see them back. So let's go to the next slide, and this will show you sort of a longer-term perspective of what's happened in terms of available seats versus actual enplanements. And this is a 30-year winter history of where we've been, going all the way back to when Continental flew back here in the early 1990s. About halfway through this chart, you'll see there's a yellow line that represents the total available seats, the actual seats that were flown. And then there's sort of a purple colored line that's a little bit higher than that. And what I've done is separated the actual flown seats versus the actual scheduled seats, because there's usually a difference. Typically, we have some winter cancellations or diversions, so that accounts for a difference between the capacity originally scheduled versus flown. But then last year, of course, halfway through March, the airlines ended up withdrawing a whole bunch of flights from their remaining March and April schedules. So there was a significant difference between the flown versus the scheduled capacity last year. And that's the reason I wanted to share this chart, because at the end of the purple line, that shows you where our current scheduled capacity is for this winter right now. And that's going to come down, because what the airlines are doing is waiting to as long as they possibly can before removing flights from the schedule to keep the product on the shelf and available for sale, hoping that the demand will be there. But they are cutting capacity as they get basically 35 to 40 days out, and which is the last opportunity they really have before these flights go out to crew bid. And the next slide I'd like to show is how our capacity right now compares against these peer airports. So I've highlighted in red kind of the capacity. This is the same line you saw on the previous slide of the available winter seat capacity into Aspen. The other lines represent what's been happening at Eagle, Jackson Hole, Hayden, Montrose, Sun Valley, Gunnison, and MMH's Mammoth Lakes in California, which is another market that we work with. There have been some very minor reductions in Aspen's capacity so far, as well as at Eagle. I expect those to come down further as United finalizes, particularly their holiday schedules. But there's been some big increases in a couple of airports, notably Jackson Hole, that's GAC, Montrose, MTG. They've seen the most significant capacity increase because just last week, both Southwest and JetBlue announced new service into the Montrose airport. Southwest representing the most significant capacity increase. And earlier this year, I'm sure many of you will recall that Southwest also announced their entry into the Hayden airport that serves Steamboat Springs. So that's the reason Hayden has also seen quite a capacity increase. It's a lot of seats. The jury is still out on whether or not those markets will be able to fill all those seats. But when I was at the conference last week, I also met with the executive vice president of Southwest Airlines. Of course, they don't have an airplane that can fly into the Aspen airport because all they fly are 737s, but they are pretty bullish on ski this winter, and that's the reason they decided to add some last-minute capacity into Montrose, basically accelerating their 10-year plan by 1 year. So the closing slide I'd like to leave you with is the route map that shows basically the service that we have in place for this winter. And we have two airlines, United and American. United's going to planning to serve all 5 hubs that they have traditionally served. So Denver, Chicago, Houston, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. And then American is serving the 4 hubs that they have traditionally served, which are those 4 that are within reach of their aircraft. And that's Chicago, DFW, their primary hub, Phoenix, and Los Angeles. So where are we going to end up in terms of capacity? Like I said, the product is on the shelf right now. It's available for purchase. The fares, for the most part, are quite attractive. They're priced a little bit higher over the holidays from the 25th of December through about the 4th of January. But there are some really attractive fares both before Christmas and after New Year's for the rest of the winter season. What are we going to see in terms of the final capacity reductions? United is really going to be a function of what their networks and what their hub structures will support. But we are anticipating that the capacity that's out there for sale right now will come down, particularly over the holidays. And those schedule changes will probably be filed by the end of this month. It's possible they could actually be filed over the weekend. I know that both United and American are burning the midnight oil right now trying to finalize their December schedules. American at this point in time plans to leave in place what we currently have open for sale. As far as United is concerned, and that's a significant capacity increase, by the way, over what they had the prior year. United's flights are going to come down because they have up to 24 daily flights in the schedule as of December 17th. And in addition to that being more capacity than what it realistically looks like we're going to need over the holidays, there's another problem in terms of the facility constraints. And you all are very well aware of the overcrowding we've had at the Aspen County Airport in recent years, particularly over the holidays. And the last thing we want to see is people elbow to elbow when we really want to maintain social distancing. So we've been in contact with United Airlines in terms of what the optimum level of capacity is going to be in terms of the flight frequency. So they're thinking somewhere in the 17 to 18 daily flights total, connecting all 5 of their hubs will probably be the right mix, hoping that they will have and expecting that they will have no more than 3 aircraft on the ground at any one point in time, whereas the earlier schedules would have had as many as 4 or 5 aircraft on the ground. So that should help with the overcrowding at the Pickens County Airport over the holidays. And between that and with the increases that American has put in place, we should be in pretty good shape in terms of accommodating that demand. As for the rest of the winter, it's going to be the same story. The product is on the shelf right now with lots of available seats, but the demand based that materializes as they get closer in is ultimately what's going to dictate what the final schedules look like. So with that, I'm going to close my comments, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to entertain any questions that there may be. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. And sticking with the theme of transportation, we'll now hear from Dan Blakenship with RFTA.
Am I on? Oh, okay. Good morning, everybody. This is Dan Blakenship, CEO of RFTA. I'd like to provide you with an overview of RFTA's response to the pandemic and then talk about the service plan for the coming winter season. But first, I want to acknowledge the courage and dedication of RFTA's frontline employees, who since the pandemic began in March have been risking their health on a daily basis in order to provide the region with essential transportation services. From mid-January until early March, RFTA began tracking the progress of the coronavirus. On March 2nd, we formed our emergency response team and formulated our plan to keep our employees and passengers safe while continuing to provide essential transportation services. The RFTA board granted me emergency powers to take whatever actions necessary to accomplish those goals. After the first COVID-19 positive case was reported in Aspen and the governor closed the ski areas, RFTA put its plan into effect. We provided sick leave for all employees experiencing symptoms of COVID-19. We promoted seasonal employees early so that they would be covered with health insurance. We guaranteed employees minimum hours so that they would continue to be paid if their shifts were eliminated. We began tracking the numerous permutations of absences, remaining in contact on a daily basis with employees out on sick leave to see if they needed help. At the height of the pandemic in late March, there were 60 employees on sick leave due to COVID-19 reasons, one of which was on a ventilator for over 3 weeks at St. Mary's Hospital in Grand Junction. Fortunately, he recovered. We began an intensive program of cleaning buses and facilities and fogging them with viricide. Beginning on March 16, RFTA reduced services 3 times in 3 weeks, and we saw our ridership plummet from over 18,000 passengers per day to under 2,000. We suspended fare collection, instituted backdoor-only boarding, provided social distancing space for bus operators, and developed social distancing seating layouts for passengers. On April 13th, RFTA instituted a region-wide face covering requirement for passengers and employees. On May 10th, RFTA implemented its Phase 4 service increase plan and installed temporary plastic sneeze curtains to protect bus operators from droplets shed by passengers getting on and off buses. On June 28, RFTA implemented its Phase 5 service increase plan, which included the operation of the Maroon Bell shuttle service. And on August 1st, we reinstituted fare collection on buses, but prohibited the use of cash onboard buses to minimize passenger dwell time near bus operators. On September 7th, RFTA implemented its fall service plan, which modified City of Aspen service levels and reintroduced the Carbondale circulator service. Ridership increased to approximately 40% of normal. However, due to the 15 passenger limit per bus, all available bus operators were required to provide the backup service needed to accommodate the overflow when the 15 passenger service or the 15 passenger limit on buses was reached. The green line on the graph represents total system-wide ridership. As you can see, it fell off the cliff back in March. And the blue line represents Highway 82 corridor services. As far as the Maroon Bell shuttle service is concerned, it was really very successful this past season, although it was extremely challenging to provide due to the 15 passenger capacity restriction on buses and the limited number of bus operators. This was the first time that a reservation system had been used for the Maroon Bell service, and the program would not have been possible this year without the invaluable assistance of H2O Ventures, who provided the reservation system, a call center, and a welcome center at Aspen Highland Ski Area. Many thanks to them and ACRA as well for hosting the reservation system on its website. In total, 61,396 tickets were sold compared to a preseason estimate of approximately 40,000. Approximately $979,000 in revenue was generated, from which RAFTA netted $715,000, which resulted in about a $150,000 subsidy for the service. All in all, in the COVID-19 environment, we felt the program was highly successful, and the positive experience with the reservation system bodes well for next season. We developed a number of charts and reports in order to monitor our performance on a daily basis, pushing the limits of our IT capability to the extreme. Here's an average daily ridership report. As typical during the off seasons, average daily commuter ridership, as seen in column C here, line 1, declined compared to our phase 5 plan that was operating during much of the summer. This chart compares the average number of bus trips requiring backup buses per day by service level. For example, line 4, column C indicates one more backup trip per day is being required than during phase 5. However, line 8 reflects that the average number of times passengers were left behind at bus stops for more than 2 minutes declined to 1 during the fall compared to 3 during phase 5. During April, we surveyed passengers to determine whether they were riding the bus for essential purposes and to find out what their travel options were. 51% were traveling to work and 36% were traveling to get food. For 41% of the passengers, RAFTA was their only travel option. We surveyed our employers to learn their opinions about RAFTA's response to the pandemic. Overall, the responses indicated employees were confident that RAFTA was supporting and protecting them during the pandemic and keeping our passengers safe. For the coming winter season, we are planning to increase the passenger capacity on buses to 50% of seated capacity, which is consistent with proposed Colorado Department of Health and Environment guidance for public transportation operators. This will provide a marginal increase over the 15 passenger limit, but we are hoping we can increase the capacity to 75% for trips under 15 minutes. Here's an example of the routes that have trip times of less than 15 minutes. Many of them are in the city. Some of them are skier shuttles. RAFTA will maintain existing safety protocols, the most important of which is the requirement for passengers and bus operators to wear face coverings. Roof hatches on buses will be left open to improve ventilation. Hand sanitizer will be available on all vehicles. Buses and facilities will be cleaned daily and fogged with viricide, and passengers will be asked not to ride if they have any of the symptoms of COVID-19. When the maximum number of passengers on a bus is reached, no additional passengers will be allowed to board, and they will have to wait for the next bus. Recruitment of seasonal employees who already have commercial licenses has been challenging, and training under social distancing conditions is quite difficult. RAFTA has had to secure additional seasonal housing for the extra employees needed for the winter, plus accommodations for quarantining. As reflected in the chart, line 9, column D, we are currently about 28 bus operators short of the minimum number needed for the winter season. We have ample applicants in the pipeline, but many drop out before completing the training process. We'll also need every operable bus in RAFTA's 110 bus fleet in order to provide higher service levels and robust backup service this winter. In terms of regional commuter services, Valley local bus service levels will remain about the same as they are during the fall. There will be some additional express service added, and 41 additional BRT trips will be added. The hogback bus service in the I-70 corridor will be about the same. There will be a slight increase in the Carbondale circulator service hours. Ride Glenwood Springs bus service will be unchanged. The frequency of service from the Brush Creek Park and Ride lot to the Snowmass Mall and Base Village will be increased to every 15 minutes during peak hours. The circulator between Ruby Park and Brush Creek Park and Ride will be operated during the day at 15-minute frequencies during peak hours. The Woody Creek van service will be reinstituted. The hours of City of Aspen service will increase slightly starting at 6:20 in the morning and ending at 12:20 a.m. at night, 7 days per week. Snowmass skier shuttles will operate every 7 minutes. These are paid for by Aspen Skiing Company, and they will operate every 7 minutes during peak periods between Aspen and Snowmass and every 15 minutes during off-peak times. Buttermilk and Highland skier shuttles will also resume their normal operations. This chart is pretty busy, and I'm sorry for all the detail, but as you can see on line 12, column E, the total number of regional bus trips will increase by approximately 257 per day compared to the fall. And local circulator trips will increase by approximately 241 for an increase of nearly 500 bus trips per day. Currently, it is difficult to predict demand because the only thing that is certain is uncertainty. But RAFT is committed to doing its best under very challenging circumstances to serve the travel needs of residents, employees, and visitors this coming winter season. I believe any questions that anyone has can be asked during the breakout session. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dan. We'll now hear from the Insights Collective, the pandemic economics think tank, and they will present us the best practices in the new normal.
Good morning, Aspen. Thanks for having me back again to your 2020 event. Over the last several decades that I've been working with you, many of you who I know for the last several decades, I thought I'd seen it all, as you may well have as well. Little did I know last year at this time that we would be facing a black swan event, the likes of which is represented by COVID-19 and now a global pandemic economy. Black swan event, by its definition, is one that occurs so rarely and infrequently that it can't be anticipated and is not likely to be prepared for, so must be reacted to. There's some question as to whether a pandemic, the likes of which COVID-19 is technically in that black swan category or not. But in either event, it's here now. Our opportunity is how to deal with it. And I'm reminded of a graphic that I saw depicting a flex capacitor, a DeLorean, and the Back to the Future saying, whatever you do, don't go to 2020. I think if we had a choice, we would all pick that choice. But since we don't, and we are faced with the opportunities that are and challenges that are in front of us. So for the next 15 or 20 minutes, we'll be giving you some food for thought about new realities forthcoming. In order to do so, we'll be taking advantage of the Insight Collective group that you see on the right, many of whom you'll recognize for their contributions to the industry individually over past years, but who've come together to create an evidence-based platform to provide both insights and a fact base for them to the destination management of leisure travel destinations in this pandemic economy. In order to accomplish that, we're organizing our data according to Kubler-Ross and their emotional response, which recognizes that people go through shock, denial, frustration, and anger and the like until they get off their heels and begin to re-engage in looking proactively. As a result, we're focusing on our activities and the communication of our insights, most specifically on what you need to know for this coming winter season. And we'll be looking forward to then turning our attention to the new realities forthcoming. Work done to date has resulted in a series of articles in collaboration with the Aspen Times and the Aspen Chamber Resort Association are being brought on Wednesdays for these last several weeks in the Aspen Times and continuing through the middle part of December. Special thanks to Eliza at the Aspen Chamber Resort Association, the Aspen Times, the underlying Swift publication, who's running this series through its other publications as well, for the greater good of all concerned. As that data evolves, the Ought to Know series is beginning to stretch into new realities in two particular areas. It looks like the virus management and mitigation based on evidence to date has not come and gone as quickly as we had hoped and may be around for some time. The W indicates the ebb and flow, if you will, of pandemic management and the restrictions on our economy. The graph at the bottom shows what might have originally been the case in yellow and is now looking to be extended in our new scenarios well into the future, raising the question of a sort of pandemic perpetual mindset, if you will, in the minds of consumers and we alike, especially those baby boomers who are particularly vulnerable. Thus, this notion as a foundation for new realities. And as the curve is squished, if you will, the unintended economic trough is increased. So the second notion is the economic consequences, best illustrated by a K because it makes so much difference by the business that you are in, by the geographical location that you've got. And I'll just focus on the number 2, which shows upside potential, as might a leisure travel destination if they are in a remote area, if they have an outdoor product or attraction, if they're far enough away from an urban environment to feel safe, but close enough for a drive market, such as mountain resort communities like Aspen, which helps explain some of the success of last summer, but raises questions about the upcoming winter. So both of these sort of new realities set the stage for some of the things that we'll be tracking in the future, a sneak preview of which is being brought to you for the balance of the presentation, starting with Susan Rubin-Stewart and the pandemic outlook.
Thank you, Ralph. I'm going to talk about pandemics, the one we are in now and future pandemics. Scientists are predicting the coronavirus is here for the long haul, even with an effective vaccine. There are a lot of unknowns, including if seasonality affects its spread, the government's and individual behavior, and whether people develop lasting immunity to the virus. The duration of immunity will greatly impact the direction of the disease through 2025 and maybe beyond. The question is not, will there be another pandemic? The question is when. Epidemics have increased in frequency over the past 15 years. The question is why. The easy answers are global travel, urbanization, and healthcare worker shortages. The more complex reason is increased human and animal contact caused by increasing populations and climate change. About 60% of new viruses come from animals, and roughly 1/3 of those can be directly attributed to deforestation, the introduction of farming development, or the harvesting of natural resources. So what's the path forward? Diligence and preparation. It's clear by now that the U.S. was terribly underprepared for the pandemic. Congress is working on legislation to tackle critical gaps in the U.S. pandemic response, such as rebuilding the public health infrastructure, stockpiling of medical supplies, coordination of the supply chain by the federal government, and solving the flawed regulations around testing development. There is some good news on the horizon. Countries who have experienced previous outbreaks, such as Taiwan and Singapore did with SARS, have tended to respond more quickly to COVID-19 than other countries. Let's hope we can all learn from COVID-19. I would now like to introduce Dave Beelan. He'll be talking to you about ski realities.
Morning, everybody. Dave Beelan here from RRC. Hope you're all having a great day in Aspen. And I'm here to review just a few things that we found from a national survey of skiers and snowboarders that we conducted in late September and early October, so very recently. A national panel that we reached out to over 20,000 active skiers and snowboarders from all corners of the U.S. What we wanted to ask them a couple of things. One was, what kinds of adjustments do they think that they're going to be okay with, or that would be acceptable, or that they would be receptive to when it comes to skiing this winter. What are skiers anticipating that they might see that's different when they get to the ski resort this year? And encouragingly, we found that most skiers are anticipating to wear a mask or face covering, and they're okay with that adjustment. Other adjustments that they're generally okay with as this winter approaches is from rental side, making online reservation for equipment rentals and trying on rental boots in some outdoor heated tent or some other type of adjusted kind of rental shop, not your traditional rental shop. So people renting are going to be okay with that. But in general, they're less receptive or less enthusiastic about having to make a reservation to ski or make a reservation to park at the ski area. There's less enthusiasm, less receptivity to that. So that's important for skiers to know what their customers are thinking ahead of time nationally. How do skiers anticipate themselves changing for this coming season? Well, a couple of encouraging things. Actually, skiers are quite receptive to opting in to receive text messages from the resorts where they visit so they can get the most updated information on parking and lift lines and other situations. And so preparing that communication method, whether it's from the resort or it's from the town or it's from some other entity, but some sort of digital electronic notification that people are more than willing to opt into is going to be a really excellent way to keep people informed this year. We see some people saying, I'm probably going to ski a little more midweek rather than weekends. And people are okay and preparing to use their car as their base lodge, eat at their car, eat at their lodging, brown bag it, because they're not really all that interested in, at the very bottom of this graph, visiting indoor retail and rental shops. So trying to keep our skiers outdoors, which the ski areas are all preparing for, is going to be really important this winter. And skiers are anticipating that. They're okay with it. So it's important to know what they're okay with and what they're not anticipating. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Barb.
Thanks, Dave. That was a great segue to talking about meetings, events, business travel. I'm Barb Taylor Carpenter and have a long career in the meetings and events field, inbound, international, business travel, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes just for a second and remember a short time ago when we could exchange handshakes, gather in large groups, I think that's called networking, and travel in gaggles like geese. I don't know whether to say me too or me neither. So the visual hopefully captures the way it was and the way it is now. So that said, there's a quick overview on business travel, which is a leading indicator for corporate meetings and conferences. Then we'll talk about leisure groups and international inbound. I could sum it up very quickly by saying aloud, oh. However, a bit of a deep dive shows the following. Business travel is still thin, with a large percentage of us doing remote work, like we're all doing right now. The silver lining is that the hospitality industry is quickly realizing that the lodging product could be considered a remote location. And if you're in the lodging sector in Aspen, what better place to work from? There is also a flee from urban phenomenon taking place. Need I say more? Make yourself available as a location that welcomes this trend and get ahead of the curve. Also, this segment, business travel, can have a large influence on decisions for meeting locations. So I'm traveling on business, I go to Aspen, I come back. Let's say we're doing face-to-face meetings again, and the meeting professional is asking me, what did I think about Aspen as a location? So keep remembering that one leads to the other. Couple of statistics on this and notes on meetings. A recent survey indicated that just under 16% of respondents would be willing to attend a conference in the next couple of months. 49% would attend after Q2 of 21. And 75% are expecting another wave of coronavirus outbreak. And I'm just going to do this. You all can do that with me. Then the group leisure travel is also slow to grow. However, the small is the new gaggle is also the leading edge in curated experiences. What's this translate to? What offerings do you have, Aspen, that would be perfect for a small group that's looking to take the time to explore the area versus 7 days in 7 countries? Partner, partner, partner. Explore the opportunities and get out in front of it. You're a perfect location for this. International inbound, not much need to spend time on this. Regional inbound is the new passportless travel until travel restrictions are eased globally, which means wear a mask, people, model the behavior and the visitor that you want to attract right now. And I'm now going to toss it over to Brian London, who's going to talk about in-migration, which I touched on very briefly, but Brian's going to do a deeper dive.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Some observations from resort destinations is simply an exodus from dense, crowded urban areas to remote, unpopulated resort areas. This is what we're calling in-migration. We can see this is pretty much due to a few factors. Number one, the perception of personal safety in these new, uncrowded, unspoiled destinations. In some instances, the urban dwellers, they're unwittingly bringing the virus with them, presenting as asymptomatic as they escape the city, only to add to the local caseload once they arrive. They, of course, don't see it this way. There's also the additional benefit, which is there's an opportunity for leisure activities, something that was once only available to them by participating in the activity during vacation, can now be part of their work-life balance. The outdoor experience is associated with an overall benefit to their lifestyle. It's just something that they would prefer to have. Now they have the opportunity to have it. The third influencer in this in-migration trend, and one that's being facilitated by the shift to online business, is a work from home or work from anywhere culture. We're seeing the same work from anywhere culture also afforded in the school environment. For those of us with school-age children, we know there's often the opportunity for the remote learning that's available to them. Many tech companies have actually expanded their work from home policies to now run through the end of Q1, which would be March 2021. And in some cases, there's a permanent shift and, I would say, an acceptability of working from anywhere. The benefits to the corporation are numerous and obvious in terms of lower overhead expenses. And so as long as the work is getting done, workers, mostly knowledge workers and high income knowledge workers at that, will continue to relocate. There are some obvious winners here. The real estate market, one of them. The real estate market's growing very quickly. And with that growth comes the associated purchases that are needed to stock the homes with essentials and durable goods, not just for a week, but oftentimes for months on end. For the in-migration permanent residents, of course, that'll just mean more spending. It also creates, in a very real sense, an expansion of the year-round market that will need products and services provided by the city. This might require additional investment into broadband, data centers, or other amenities that the tech culture simply needs to get the work done. One final thought before going back to Dave. These new full-time residents don't necessarily think of themselves as outsiders. Many of them have been vacationing here for many years. They already feel like they're part of the fabric of the community. When the pandemic shifts in the future, and a sense of normalcy returns to tourism patterns, it's going to be worthwhile to track these resident perceptions of tourism and be able to segment them by the newer arrivals compared to their longer serving residential counterparts. It's something to keep in mind. Over to you, Dave.
Thanks, Brian. That's great information, and it's a great lead into a little bit of second homeowner information that we have from the RRC Mountain Traveler Sentiment Survey, the same survey I talked about earlier that was conducted this fall with skiers and snowboarders all across the U.S. And one thing for people who identify themselves as second homeowners in a mountain town, and this is national level results, not necessarily specific to Aspen, but just to give you some context about what we're seeing from second homeowners who are skiers and have a second home in a mountain town somewhere, how they intend to use their mountain home this coming winter. And one of the interesting things we saw is that the majority of second homeowners really said they don't anticipate changing the way they typically use their second home this winter. So they're still anticipating, the same level of usage that they have in the past. However, there was definitely a significant minority of about 20% of the second homeowners we talked to indicated that they were planning to use their second home more either themselves personally or for family and friends, but not so much putting it in the rental pool. So 20% of second homes not going in the rental pool this winter is certainly going to have an impact, both in terms of short-term rentals, whether it's through a management company or Airbnb, and potentially long-term rentals, which is something we've seen in the past that makes it challenging for employee housing. So it certainly seems like the second homeowner, the inventory of homes that are available for rent, either for short or long-term, is going to be limited this winter. And with that, I'll pass it back to Ralph to wrap us up.
I can't help but make a reference to Darwin and his original comments related to the survival of the fittest, which may be true for the pandemic, but he actually restated his intent by saying it's not the fittest or the most cunning, but the most adaptive who are best likely to survive. And I think that has a lot to do with the business side, the economic side of the pandemic and our future. We'll be concluding our comments, sending it back to Eliza and the team, and looking forward to joining you in the open Q&A session where we can further explore some of our new realities and answer any questions that you have for us.
Thank you to all of our presenters today. Now I'll ask everyone to break out into the small group question and answer sections. If you're listening on Facebook Live, this will conclude your version of the presentation. If you're with us on the Zoom call, we'll gather here together after this question and answer break. Thank you again to all presenters, and please enjoy the questions and answer section. Further questions for Dan? Sorry, since the breakout rooms aren't functioning, I'll just facilitate all questions towards Dan.
Hey, I just wanted to, Dan, it's Michael Miracle. I wanted to see if you could restate a stat that you mentioned that just blew me away. You said that, was it 41% of people surveyed said that RFTA was their only form of transportation during the pandemic? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, this was from survey data that we received in April, which was during the stay at home when people theoretically were supposed to travel for essential purposes only. So, and we didn't have just tons of it. We had a kind of a text survey and we didn't have tons of respondents, but early on, we used that because we had, Rifle booted us out of town because they were afraid of RFTA spreading the pandemic. Glenwood Springs nearly booted us out of town and missed doing it by one vote. And we wanted to be able to show our board and elected officials throughout the region that services we were providing really were essential, and the vast majority of people using them were using them for essential purposes.
Yeah, I'd say essential almost even understates it. That's a vital public service, and yeah, I just echo everything Tori said. Bravo.
Thank you. Thank you.
Further questions for Dan? I'll set up Bill Tomcich to take questions.
I have a question for Bill. It's Jeanette.
Hi, Jeanette.
Hi, Bill. Great presentation. And as always, thanks for being so on top of all of our airline issues. I was interested to hear about the Montrose increase or focus by Southwest and JetBlue, I think you said, into Montrose. And I was wondering, you didn't mention Grand Junction in any of your comments. And I wonder if Grand Junction or Montrose taking over sort of for some of the taking precedent over Grand Junction, or is Grand Junction still a really viable opportunity too?
Grand Junction is definitely still a viable opportunity. They've seen some stability in their air service. They haven't seen the kind of growth that we've seen here. In fact, they did hit rock bottom during the pandemic. At one point in time, United actually consolidated the routes between Grand Junction and Montrose and did what they call a round robin or tag, where they connected Grand Junction with Montrose to consolidate their flights during periods of weak demand, just like American did with their Mountain Hopper between Aspen, Eagle, and Montrose back in May and June. But Montrose has been growing a lot. Question is whether or not they're actually going to have the demand to support this capacity increase. Like I mentioned, Southwest has long had a strategy to go into ski markets. And in addition to the 2 ski markets that Southwest launched this year in Colorado, being Montrose as well as Hayden, they've also announced new service into Palm Springs and Miami. And then just a couple of days ago, announced another Colorado market, which is Colorado Springs, which they're going to launch in the second quarter of next year after they end their seasonal flying into Hayden and Montrose. So Southwest is definitely on a new path in terms of their strategy. And I've known about this new strategy for quite some time. At this point in time, Aspen is obviously not a part of it because they don't have any aircraft other than the Boeing 737s, which obviously are not able to fly or welcome to fly into our airport.
Thank you.
Further questions for Bill Tomcich? Dan?
Yeah, I want to ask Bill, how come he still looks so young? I mean, I've been here for 30 years and he's been...
I've been here for 25 years, trying to stay active and healthy. There's one other point that I'd like to address here during this Q&A was, I didn't mention it in my pre-recorded presentation, but that's about the safety procedures that the airlines have in place and some of the incredible safety records that they have as a result. I mentioned I was at an air service conference in Cincinnati the week before last, which in and of itself was an incredible experience to see how you can actually safely bring 150 people together in a conference room, socially distanced. Everybody had their own 6-foot tables. But there were some really extraordinary statistics shared at that particular conference. I'm going to quote just a couple from the highlights, which is that flying has truly never been safer than it is today. And Frontier Airlines' Daniel Schurz, who's their chief commercial officer, quoted an IATA report by talking about how you're more likely to be struck by lightning than to catch COVID-19 on an airplane. And then American Airlines' Allison Taylor, she's their chief customer officer, further cited the same report, and which is done in concert with Boeing, stating that of 1 billion global travelers since June 1 on 13 million flights, there have only been 17 confirmed cases of COVID-19 since June 1. And that's across the entire globe. And then there's another stat she referenced from a recent Harvard study in September specifically, that of 22 million US air travelers last month, there were 0 reported cases of COVID-19 transmission in flight. So with the unique airflow systems on board modern commercial airliners, even United Airlines reiterated the same message. Patrick Crell, who's their VP of International, quoted another study that said 18 inches of space on board an aircraft is the equivalent of 14 feet of social distancing in most indoor environments. because of all the airflow systems that they have on board. So I've personally, every time I fly, and I've been on a number of different flights on 3 different airlines just to experience different protocols, I've become increasingly more confident in the safety on board the aircraft myself. And I would encourage everybody to get out and travel to experience what's happening elsewhere and other destinations, because there are a lot of really good best practices that we can all learn from.
Thanks, Bill. I'll facilitate any questions to Mike Kaplan. Gonna have to use my virtual coffee joke again, people. Perk you up. I'll go ahead if there's no questions for Mike.
I got one.
Okay, go ahead, Jeanette.
Great job, Mike. Thanks for being here and for sharing all that. I wonder if you would go into maybe a little bit more detail about how, without the reservation system, how this is really going to work. You know, you go, and I understand the focus on the app and that you're wanting everybody to reserve, but will that then trigger a decision to shut off or to wait? How will that work? Just logistically, I guess is my question.
In terms of
how you determine how many people are either in the gondola, on the chairs, on the mountain. I mean, I don't know if you're trying to look at a total number on each mountain or on each run, or how you're looking at spreading it out. I'm just curious the application of what your practices will be.
I think the main way to look at it is, we've implemented congestion pricing. So we are anticipating busier periods and busier times and trying to disincentivize visitation then through pricing and through some of the programming I suggest. I referred to the ski club as maybe one of the simplest examples. So we've gone back and looked at our visitation by day, as we always do. We've adjusted that for the holidays, as we always do, and then reforecast. What's really tricky in forecasting is obviously the fact that everything's changed. International businesses probably goes down to 0. We see more regional visitation. We see this longer stay that Andrew referenced. And so we are looking at all that and trying to forecast that visitation, and as I said, set up that congestion pricing. And then what we'll do as we go is look at the pre-bookings and try to anticipate any bubbles. And as we see those coming, then we will reduce the amount of inventory available, whether that's pre-purchase or day of purchase, or whatever it is. So, there's a bunch of other stuff we're looking at. Okay, and I think the reason the easiest way to do it is say, okay, you did whatever. Just cut your number of your peak visitation on any given day in half. But I think, as we know, that visitation doesn't equate to crowding, because it only tells you how many people went through the gate at least one time during the day. But that doesn't mean you didn't have a line, because there's a powder day, right? And powder days, we don't have that much visitation. Right? Usually powder days are down 20% from a sunny day of the day before. But you walk by the gondola and you go, well, oh my God, that line was down to the little nil. So we're trying to address it that way and giving people information around parking, availability, real-time lift line updates, whether that's checking the cams. We have cams at the bottom of Aspen Mountain and the bottom of Snowmass. You can check real time what that lift line looks like, and getting people to change their behavior that way. And then finally, I just say we're working with the county now. Just got the state guidelines to work through exactly what that might mean and what additional collars we might have to put on total volume. So stay tuned. It's all a work in progress, but we're feeling pretty good about our ability to handle, to safely manage our operations and maintain social distance with what we've got set up so far.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Heather?
Hi, Mike. I was, it seems like town is always struggling with hiring enough employees. And I'm just wondering, what percent of your winter workforce is J1s? And if you're hopeful to get some of those J1s in at some point in the ski season.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Heather. I'm very, very concerned about hiring. J1s were about a third of our annual seasonal workforce that we hired annually. I don't quite say that right, but we hire about 1,200 people a year, and about 400 of those were J1s. We're not holding out any hope that we'll get any. I've heard some rumor we might have some availability in hospitality, but haven't seen that confirmed. And of course, part of this is immigration policy. The other part is travel policy. And even if you could get J1s, can they and would they come here? We're very concerned about it. We're recruiting aggressively. We hired another recruiter. So we have 6 people who that's all they do is sort of outbound and inbound recruiting. And, so far we're seeing the gaps in the places you would expect: housekeeping, cooks and culinary, a little worried about snowmaking and snowmass, a little bit worried about lift operators, childcare, those things. So we may be reaching out to the community asking for help. I know a lot of kids are coming back from college or never went or deferred going to whatever city, and they're staying here. So we're hoping to engage the community and get them to work and working on some flexible hiring policies as well.
Great, thank you.
Ralph has a question for Mike.
Mike, good to see you again. Enjoyed your presentation. Thanks much about that. We're beginning to see signs that the upcoming winter season behavior, of course, different than it has in the past, is going to be balancing between demand from the consumers and limited supply based on the pandemic. Balancing that out does have the potential for some silver lining if people actually have more flexibility in their travel schedules and could be motivated to travel in lower seasons and away from higher seasons, be it midweek or different than holidays and school breaks because of the family travel patterns and such. Are you seeing any hopeful indications from your market intelligence in that direction, sort of dropping the peaks and lifting the valleys? It sounds like the, what did you call it? Congestion pricing would be a motivating rheostat to be able to be used to accomplish that same sort of thing. But I wonder if you've got any hard data or a crystal ball.
Thanks, Ralph. No crystal ball, obviously. We have our experience from this summer, and we do have some survey data that does suggest people are gonna be more flexible. And so I talked mostly today about our season pass pricing, but our ticket pricing, which launched at 10 a.m. This morning, also reflects that. So it's probably one of the accelerated learnings from COVID. I hesitate to call it dynamic pricing because we all know that dynamic pricing out there is quite sophisticated. We've spoken to people in the baseball industry, for instance. They'll change their price by seat, by day, it'll change based on the record of the opposing team and the weather, and they have all these variables they plug in. We're not that sophisticated, but this year we're definitely going to have different pricing for those, to try and do exactly that, Ralph, is to try and drive some weekday business and diminish some weekend business and pull people away from those peak times. So again, we're learning a lot going into this season, and again, I'm hopeful that we can do it through that congestion pricing, that dynamic pricing, and not have to just say, we've got to stop, we got to shut it down, you have to reserve in advance and create all kinds of new problems for all of us.
I appreciate what you and ACRA are doing both, trying to find some lemonade, to be made out of these lemons. Our Insight Collective group is spending time looking at COVID as a change agent and accelerant, for those who are positioned to be able to take advantage of the opportunities, however oblique they are. Extra cup of coffee in the morning sometimes helps.
Thanks, Ralph and Mike. Just in the interest of time, does anybody have any questions for Andrew Ernemann from his real estate presentation? I will note that the entire presentation will be recorded. It'll be uploaded to Grassroots TV for broadcast. It's also Facebook Live, and we will have a link to it on our website. Questions for Andrew?
I'd like to ask Andrew if you see this trend continuing, or is supply going to really slow down sales, or do you think where do you think we end sales for the year, and where do we end up in the first quarter of 21?
Good question, Mike. Thanks. So I think for sure through the end of this year, it's continuing. I mean, we've seen all the way up until this past week showing activity stronger than I've ever seen it in October, and contracts still in place, and title companies are actually turning down closings in some cases because of the timing and just where they are with staffing. So it feels like what we have in the pipeline and the interest level is still there to carry us through the end of this year. I think what's really interesting to me is hearing you and others talk about controlling congestion, and I'm thinking, gosh, what a flip of the business model from the past, where it's like pump, and just try and go. And how sustainable is that? So at what point are we getting to where people are saying, all right, it's too much, either hassle or it's just feeling like I'm around too many people. In my world, what I'm looking at right now is the new listings coming on the market. And as I presented, the supply is really low right now. Historically, the new listings coming on are at 10, 20, 30% higher prices than where we've even had these higher closings. And at some point, I feel like buyers are going to pump the brakes. They're just going to say, all right, I want a place there. I don't need the place there. I mean, that's always been the case with the real estate market. It's a want, not a need. I think that want has shifted towards a need for a lot of people this year, thinking this is where they want to have their kids in online school or in in-person school, or they just want to spend more time. So that's driven the market. But I do think low supply and higher prices is going to slow us down in the coming 6 months.
Thanks, Andrew. Great insights. If there are any other questions for Andrew, we look forward. We are working on bringing the Insights Collective team to the membership in another webinar. So that's going to be a member benefit coming at you. So I hope to get you in front of this panel as well. But if there are any questions before we close out, please don't hesitate to ask. This cast of characters from Insights Collective.
Yeah. I was curious, I think it was Susan talked about the timing being much more prolonged than many of us are hoping for, and this continuing on. Can you talk a little more about why the most people I've heard from are pretty optimistic about midsummer things normalizing a bit, but you sounded a little more skeptical.
Yeah, I did a lot of research on what the experts are seeing, and they said it's going to take a long time to get the vaccine rolled out. We'll probably have a decrease again in the summertime, but it's going to take towards probably the fall. And then they really don't believe it will ever go away, and that it'll be hot spots that pop up, and they'll be about managing it. I mean, it certainly will be reduced, but I think without making any kind of political statement, I think if we have a stronger centralized governmental approach, that it'll be much easier in the United States than it was, especially maybe up to 6 months after the vaccine comes out. And I think it'll just become a new normal, a new way to live. And like I said, if we can take the experiences that we saw some of the nations that dealt with SARS, if we can start reacting that way, I think it'll be, I think the United States will be in much better shape.
I don't know, did that answer your question?
And Susan, this is BT. I'm going to jump in on this and share some information with Mike. One of the things that we're doing at Insights Collective, Mike, is maintaining what we're calling a research library, but it's really aggregating all sorts of articles from either the industry, outside the industry, global. And there's two areas that I'm going to share with you right now. One is specific to this. So Axios, I don't know if you're familiar with that news service, at the end of August, it was talking about how pandemics are becoming more common, and how we react to them and how we plan for them and manage them is really the key to that. So there was some interesting info on that, and I can share the link from you offline. And another was your comment about hiring. And there was a recent article in the Colorado Sun that talked about how ski area operators are seeing a surge in applications from college students and locals. So the beauty about locals is, as you all know, they already have housing. I mean, we could go back to the real estate comment, but the housing part is a big deal. And I could share the link on that just as background information. But the Axios article was one that we have talked about internally, and not in a negative or pessimistic way, but in a proactive way. How do we become proactive as opposed to reactive? I think that most people on this session would agree that a lot of what we've done was reactive. So,
Ralph, jumping in.
Go ahead, Ralph. Sorry.
Yeah, just jumping in for a moment. The work we're doing through Eliza and Aspen Times for Aspen and the broader community is really focused on the short term at the moment, what we ought to know for the upcoming winter season. But we also see these new realities beginning to take shape in 2021 and beyond. And we are beginning to turn our attention to those long-term ramifications, whether it's real estate and this in-migration, excuse me, and its impact on the housing market by way of one example, or this notion of pandemic-like thinking being around for a long time. The best data that we've got so far looks at the success of Asian communities compared to Europe and the United States, where there's been a social contract for decades about how people forego their own interest to the greater good. Someone gets a cold and they put a mask on as a social contract to protect one another. It's been around for a decade or more. It's sort of baked into their economy, and they seem to be much more easily able to handle these pandemic-like events. One's called a black swan, but really a black swan event shouldn't be anticipated, and these look like they could be and proacted against. So we think there's going to be a shift in the long term about how people think about personal health and safety, particularly in the baby boomers who have been sustaining our leisure travel discretionary markets for a long time. Too early to say, but on our list for Q1 2021.
Also, I'm adding a couple hyperlinks right now to the chat with some good articles on the future of pandemics.
Thanks, Susan. And Anne, did you have a question for the Insights Collective?
I wanted to hear more about future of pandemics, but that just got answered right here. I'll look at that article. The other thing is just, hearing all this, making lemonade out of lemons, seeing the silver lining. I don't know what the unemployment percentage is right now in Pitkin County, but as Mike, as you said, you're looking for employees. RFTA, I know, is looking for bus drivers. Hopefully we can put some of these people back to work. But then, as always in Aspen, you have these competing things going on. If we can find some people to work up here, we're losing housing like crazy because of all the people coming in and pushing the real estate market up. It's just an observation, and continues to be a challenge. But thanks to RFTA, thanks to ACRA, thanks to Ski Company for everything you're doing, and your flexibility and innovation and making all this stuff, making this winter work as well as the summer, it sounds like.
I have one question that maybe you guys have been talking about in your community or might be able to answer. I live in Summit County, and I really haven't heard much about the concern over employee housing and the age group that lives in employee housing. And if there's concerns that it's going to be like the college dormitories and so forth, and how and what I guess what's going on there, what are the plans to try and prevent the spread from happening in employee housing like in colleges?
I can take that in terms of from Aspen Skiing Company's perspective. We have a whole sort of separate plan, and it's a key part of what we're developing, with the county. We've got different protocols. We're probably shouldn't get ahead of what's going to happen, but the short answer is yes. We're aware that that's an area we got to manage more aggressively, and we're prepared to do that. So, yeah. And I think everybody's doing that. I think it's required in the state guidelines that's I don't know if anyone's from the counties on, but that's part of what you submit to your LPH at your local public health authority, and then is also then ultimately approved by the state. So I think we're all doing that.
Thank you. Well, it has been a big, fruitful morning. I hope everybody enjoyed the content. I'm going to wrap us up. Thank you so much for your time. Please stay tuned to the ACRA emails for information forthcoming about future time to get in front of the Insights Collective group, as well as a follow-up recording from this presentation. Thank you so much to all the presenters that were here and gave us their time and insights. And we wish you luck with cautious optimism for this winter season. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.